"Don't move, eat this." The whisper stopped Arthur Vance dead in his tracks on the freezing park bench. It completely broke his careful plan for the morning, which was to sit quietly and observe the city without anyone knowing who he really was. In just 2 hours, Arthur was scheduled to lead a massive board meeting at Vance Global, the $40 billion shipping empire he built from scratch. But right now, under his heavy, stained disguise, nobody saw a powerful CEO. They just saw a lonely old man shivering in the winter wind. Arthur turned his head slowly, expecting a threat, but found himself looking down at a kid. This was Leo, a 12-year-old runaway whose frantic, unslept eyes showed he had been living on the streets for days. Leo's face was smudged with dirt, and his breath came out in shaky puffs of white air. Yet instead of asking for money, the boy was holding out his hands like a shield. In his thin, chapped fingers, he offered half of a bruised apple and a squished, stale sandwich. The contrast was staggering. Arthur had enough wealth to buy every restaurant in the city, and his personal security team was hiding just a block away, ready to protect his fortune at a moment's notice. But Leo didn't know about the billions or the bodyguards. In the freezing morning air, the hungry boy simply saw another person who looked like they wouldn't survive the day without a friend. Arthur stared at the crushed sandwich, his mind immediately looking for the catch. In the business world, nothing was ever free, and a $40 billion fortune taught you to suspect everyone. He figured this was a clever trick. Maybe the boy was a distraction for a pickpocket, or maybe he was a beggar trying to look generous so Arthur would feel guilty and give him a $100 bill. Arthur prepared to wave the kid away with a cold, sharp look, ready to return to his quiet observation. But as he raised his eyes to speak, Arthur noticed a tiny, undeniable detail that stopped his suspicion instantly. Leo's hands were shaking. It was not a gentle shiver from the cold winter wind, but a violent, deep tremble born from absolute starvation. The boy's knuckles were white, and his skin looked pale and hollow. He was clearly running on empty, his body desperate for any kind of fuel. Yet, even with that fierce hunger tearing through him, Leo did not bring the food to his own mouth. He kept his arms extended, holding the bruised apple and stale bread out toward Arthur like a stubborn rule that could not be broken. He refused to take a single bite until the old man took his half first. That specific sight changed everything for Arthur. A scammer would be watching Arthur's pockets, waiting for a wallet to appear. A hustler would be talking fast, telling a sad story to get cash. But Leo was completely silent, focusing all his remaining energy just on holding that food steady. This was not a trick or a clever game to get money. It was a real, painful sacrifice. The kid was genuinely willing to go completely empty just to make sure a stranger didn't starve. For the first time in decades, Arthur realized he was looking at pure kindness, given with absolutely no expectation of getting anything in return. Arthur carefully reached out and took the half of the bruised apple, nodding his thanks. Only then did Leo finally take a bite of his own stale sandwich, sitting down on the edge of the freezing bench. As they ate in silence, the boy reached into his oversized coat pocket and pulled out a badly cracked, discarded smartphone. He had plugged a pair of cheap, frayed headphones into it. Leo wasn't trying to show off. He just wanted to share something strange he had found while trying to stay warm the night before. "I found this in a dumpster behind that big glass tower down the street," Leo whispered, pointing toward the corporate headquarters of Vance Global. "I was just looking for a dry place to sleep out of the wind. I turned it on to see if it worked, and I accidentally hit play on a voice memo. You should hear this. It sounds like bad guys in a movie, but it's real." Leo unplugged the headphones, turned the volume all the way up and pressed the screen. Through the static and the buzz of the cracked speaker, a voice cut through the cold air. Arthur's entire body went stiff. He didn't need a high-tech lab to analyze the sound. He knew that voice perfectly. It belonged to Edward, his own nephew. "The old man has lost his mind, sitting in parks like a vagrant," Edward's voice sneered from the tiny speaker. "The paperwork is already moving. By Friday afternoon, the doctors will sign the papers declaring him legally incompetent. The board is completely on our side. Once Arthur is locked away in the asylum, we vote to sell off the logistics division and split the cash. He won't even know what hit him." Another voice chimed in, laughing. It was the head of Arthur's own board of directors, confirming the exact time and date of the hostile takeover. Arthur sat perfectly still, his heart pounding against his ribs. It was undeniable, objective proof of a deep betrayal from the people he trusted most. They thought he was weak and losing his grip, but this dirty, cracked phone had just handed him the ultimate evidence. His own family was plotting to steal his life's work, completely unaware that their secret plan had just been delivered directly to his hands by a homeless boy sharing his lunch. Arthur did not panic, nor did he drop his disguise. In the world of high-stakes business, showing your cards too early is the easiest way to lose the game. He simply nodded at Leo, giving the boy a gentle, tired smile as if he had just listened to a harmless ghost story. To keep his standard routine completely intact and avoid scaring the kid, Arthur maintained his quiet, helpless persona. He acted like an ordinary old man who was just grateful for the company and the half-eaten apple. But underneath his dirty jacket, Arthur's fingers were already moving. He reached into a hidden inner pocket and pressed a tiny button on a high-tech, encrypted burner earpiece that was molded perfectly to the inside of his ear. With 2 taps, he bypassed his office landline and dialed his nephew's private number. He needed to verify the threat immediately, acting with the precise execution of a master chess player who is always 3 moves ahead of his opponent. When the line clicked open, Edward answered with a loud, impatient huff. Arthur took a slow breath and deliberately changed his voice. He made it sound weak, frail, and slightly confused, exactly what his treacherous nephew expected to hear. "Edward, my boy," Arthur wheezed softly into the hidden microphone, shielding his mouth from the wind. "I'm just out taking a short walk. My mind gets a bit cloudy in the mornings these days, you know. I just wanted to call and say how grateful I am to have you. Thank you for looking after the company and handling the board members for me. I don't know what I would do without you." On the other end of the line, Edward's voice instantly changed from annoyed to falsely sweet, filled with a fake kindness that made Arthur's blood run cold. "Of course, Uncle Arthur," Edward replied smoothly, a hidden smirk practically visible through the phone. "Don't you worry about a single thing. Just stay where you are, relax, and let us handle the heavy lifting. We have everything completely under control for Friday." Arthur thanked him again and ended the call. The dramatic irony was total. Edward thought he was comforting a foolish, broken old man who was practically walking himself into an asylum. In reality, Arthur had just confirmed every single detail of the plot. His nephew believed the trap was set for Arthur, completely unaware that by revealing his hand, he had just walked right into Arthur's own crosshairs. Arthur stood up from the bench, brushing the frost from his tattered coat. He looked down at Leo and offered a warm smile, suggesting they walk down the street to get a hot meal as a thank you for the food. Leo gladly agreed, shivering but eager to get out of the biting wind. As they walked together toward the business district, Arthur guided the boy toward a very specific block. He needed visual confirmation of the enemy's movements, and he knew exactly where his nephew liked to celebrate his secret deals. Soon they arrived outside a beautifully lit, high-end restaurant where the city's richest elites gathered. Arthur and Leo stopped safely across the street, blending into the shadows of a gray brick building. Through the massive, sparkling glass windows, the scene inside looked warm and incredibly cheerful. People in expensive suits were laughing, waiters were serving fine food, and jazz music seemed to drift through the heavy doors. It looked like a picture of pure happiness, but for Arthur, the view was deeply chilling. Sitting at a prime corner table, right in plain sight, was Edward. He wasn't alone. Sitting across from him was a notorious, corrupt lawyer known for making dirty legal problems disappear for a high price. The 2 men were smiling broadly, raising their crystal glasses in a toast. Arthur focused his eyes intensely on his nephew's face. Over a long career of dealing with international business partners, Arthur had learned how to read lips with incredible accuracy. Skill that was now a vital tool. He watched Edward's mouth move clearly through the glass as the young man leaned over the table. "Once the old man is signed into the asylum on Friday, change the locks," Edward instructed, his lips forming the cold words perfectly. The lawyer nodded with a wicked grin, tapping a thick leather folder on the table that undoubtedly held the fake medical papers. The contrast was absolute. Inside the warm, elite restaurant, the villains were celebrating their cruel plot, thinking they were completely safe behind the glass. Outside in the freezing cold, a dirty street kid and a disguised billionaire watched their every move. Arthur now had all the visual proof he needed. The trap was real, the players were identified, and it was time to turn the tables. Arthur knew that the best way to catch a predator is to let them think they have already caught you. Instead of running away or calling the police early, he decided to walk straight into the center of the trap. He turned to Leo and told him it was time to visit the big glass tower down the street. By intentionally re-entering his own corporate headquarters, Arthur was executing a flawless script. He wanted the corrupt board members to believe their hostile takeover was going exactly as planned, making them overconfident and careless. The physical transition into the building was intense and dramatic. Arthur walked through the massive revolving glass doors of Vance Global, still dressed in his stained rags and heavy boots. Next to him walked Leo, a dirty street kid holding a crushed backpack. As they stepped onto the polished marble floors of the grand lobby, the warmth of the building hit them, but the social atmosphere was freezing cold. The security guards and high-level executives walking through the lobby stopped in their tracks. They looked down at Arthur and Leo with absolute disgust, whispering to each other and stepping away as if poverty were a disease you could catch. A young vice president in a tailored suit rolled his eyes and scoffed out loud, gesturing for building security to throw the two intruders back out onto the street. Arthur saw every nasty look and felt the heavy weight of their judgment, but he didn't blink. He kept his head down and let his shoulders slump, playing the part of the broken old man perfectly. He needed them to feel superior. He wanted his nephew and the corrupt board members upstairs to receive the urgent message that crazy old Arthur had just wandered into the building looking helpless. By allowing his executives to treat him like garbage, Arthur was drawing his enemies out into the open, setting a perfectly balanced trap that would close the moment they tried to make their move. Arthur led Leo straight up to the top floor, stepping into the massive, glass-walled boardroom just as the emergency meeting was being called to order. The trap sprung at the exact coordinates chosen by the antagonists. Edward and the corrupt board members were all gathered around a sleek mahogany table, ready to sign the papers to strip Arthur of his power. When Edward looked up and saw his uncle standing there in dirty rags alongside a street kid, a cruel, victorious smile spread across his face. He thought his victory was complete. "Uncle Arthur, you really have lost your mind, wandering into a corporate meeting looking like a beggar," Edward sneered, standing up and reaching for the phone on the wall. "This is embarrassing. Security, come up to the penthouse floor immediately and throw this garbage out of my building." But as Edward pressed the button, the main boardroom doors slid open, and the entire room froze. Instead of the standard building guards, a highly trained team of professional, unflagged tactical assets moved into the room. Arthur's elite personal legal team and a group of federal investigators walked in, blocking both exits in complete, terrifying silence. They didn't draw weapons or shout, but their heavy presence completely neutralized the room. Edward slowly lowered the phone, his face turning pale as he realized these men did not work for him. Then Arthur stood up straight, his slouched shoulders squaring with absolute authority. He unzipped his dirty, stained winter coat and let it drop to the floor. Beneath it, he was wearing a perfectly tailored three-piece suit, looking every bit like the powerful billionaire who built the empire. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek tablet and placed it on the table. The entire room went completely paralyzed. The executives who had just been snickering and looking down their noses were suddenly holding their breath, unable to move or speak. Arthur looked around the silent room with the calm, steady gaze of a master commander. In a matter of seconds, without a single shout or any chaotic violence, the power dynamic had completely flipped. The predators were now the prey, trapped inside the very room where they thought they were going to steal a kingdom. The federal investigators moved forward with quiet efficiency, laying out the official arrest warrants and the printed transcripts of the voice recordings on the smooth mahogany table. There were no flashing lights, no loud arguments, and no dramatic struggles. This was a clean, professional sweep. One by one, the corrupt board members were handed their legal papers and escorted out of the room, their heads hanging low in shame as they realized their careers and reputations were completely ruined. Edward did not fight back or try to scream for help. All the fake confidence drained out of his body like water emptying out of a cracked glass. He slumped heavily into a large leather chair, his eyes fixed on the dirty coat resting on the floor. He looked at Arthur, then at Leo, and finally at the federal agent standing by the door. "You knew the whole time," Edward said aloud, his voice dropping to a hollow whisper. He explicitly stated his own defeat, making the reality of his failure sink into the quiet room. He realized that his entire brilliant plan had been nothing more than a game Arthur allowed him to play until the trap was ready to close. With a simple nod from Arthur, the agents led Edward away, closing the heavy glass doors behind them. Suddenly, the massive boardroom was completely empty and silent. As the rush of adrenaline finally faded from Arthur's system, a profound, ordinary tiredness settled over him. Fighting a corporate battle against your own family takes a heavy toll, leaving a deep emotional exhaustion that money can never truly fix. He sat down at the head of the table, feeling every single one of his years. He looked over at Leo, who was standing quietly in the corner, and realized that while the institutional cleanup was finished, the real work of building a trustworthy future was just beginning. 6 months passed, and the storm that almost destroyed the Vance empire completely cleared away. Life at the top of the glass tower was completely different now, filled with a new sense of structural alignment and permanent safety. The corrupt executives were gone, replaced by honest people who valued loyalty over greed. But the biggest change wasn't happening in the corporate boardroom. It was happening inside Arthur's own home, where a brand new reality had finally taken root for both the billionaire and the boy who saved him. On a heavy oak desk inside a quiet mansion, the light caught a stack of official legal documents. The papers were stamped with golden corporate seals, clearly nomming Leo as the sole legal heir to the entire Vance trust. It was a massive inheritance, ensuring that the boy would never have to worry about a warm place to sleep or a hot meal ever again. Arthur had used his power to create a safe runway for Leo's future, protecting the child just as fiercely as the child had once protected him on that freezing park bench. Across the room, sitting near a crackling fireplace, Leo was deeply focused on his studies. He was now clean-cut, wearing a warm wool sweater and surrounded by shelves filled with ancient books in a magnificent private library. He looked healthy, happy, and completely at peace. As Arthur walked into the room carrying 2 warm mugs of cocoa, Leo looked up from his homework and smiled. The boy looked at the golden documents on the desk, then back at the man who had become like a father to him. "You know, I've been thinking about everything that happened," Leo said softly, his voice calm and wise beyond his years. He offered a beautiful, simple truth that cut through all the complex world of business and money. "True wealth isn't what you keep in a vault, Arthur. It's what you're willing to divide in half when you have nothing left." Arthur smiled, knowing the boy was exactly right. In the end, the greatest fortune in the world wasn't found in a bank account or a billion-dollar company. It was found in the pure character of a child who was willing to share his last bite of food with a stranger, proving that true human goodness is the most powerful force of all.